and welcome for joining us on this lovely day today. Today we'll be talking about the lost generation. The term lost generation comes from Gertrude Stein's comment on one of Ernest Hemingway's writing pieces. It mostly refers to the Americans who were in early adulthood when World War I ended. They were called this because of the new values and sentiments of the 1920s that didn't reflect what they were taught growing up, and many were skeptical of the direction America was moving in. It was for this reason that many writers and philosophers moved to Paris, France. The lost generation was scattered around America and Europe. For many, the United States' involvement in World War I came without reason and was immensely falsified by the government with the use of propaganda and restrictions on the American people. Many men were drafted, and although the Allies won the war, many lives were lost. The generation that was raised during this controversial time was never taught the solid values of America and the morals, and really found themselves unsure of their purpose in society. Similar to those in young adulthood during Vietnam who found new ideals and a new philosophy. Leading to the criticizing and confusing lost generation was all the new technology, such as cars and automatic weapons. There were new jobs, and even women had developed a new role as they became more involved in the workforce and really embraced their sexuality with the famous flappers. These changes repulsed many novelists and writers who enjoyed the moral America. For this reason, they decided to stay in Paris where they were drafted, or many decided to move to Europe because the America they had grown up in and loved was gone. It was also much easier to travel from America into Europe because the US had a lot of money and had developed passenger aircrafts. The pieces written by expatriates were unlike anything before. They criticized new American practices and created new styles of fictions and new perspectives on the world. Hopefully, the lost generation can teach us much about America and about the world.
Hemingway and Fitzgerald are two members of the lost generation who changed their careers and lifestyles to explore the new ideas of the century. Ernest Hemingway was born into a small family in the suburbs of Chicago. Throughout his high school and college career, Hemingway realized that he was a skilled writer with great potential. His writing career was quickly interrupted when he volunteered in the Red Cross as an ambulance driver in Italy. On his first day, he had to save women from an explosion in Naples. This tragedy became the platform for his first great book, Death in the Afternoon. After the war, Hemingway fell in love with Europe and became a foreign correspondent for the Toronto Star Weekly in Paris. During this time there, he wrote over 88 stories about wars, travel, and the general European lifestyle. His travels to England, Spain, and France inspired many of his famous books, including The Sun Also Rises, The Fifth Column, and The Indian Camp. During World War II, Hemingway returned to Europe and was present in the landing at Normandy, the liberation of Paris, as well as the Battle of the Bulge. In 1954, Hemingway received the Nobel Prize for Literature after writing many novels about the new evolving 20th century. Francis Scott Fitzgerald is known for his great novel The Great Gatsby, which is being discussed in every high school in America for its variety of challenging ideas. Fitzgerald graduated Princeton University with the goal to become a writer. He enlisted into the army but was never deployed. During the stressful time, he wrote a couple unique books which impressed many publishers. In 1920, he published The Side of Paradise, which made him famous because it wrote about the jazz age of the time. He decided to move to France in 1924, where he wrote his greatest book, The Great Gatsby. After his main success, he stumbled upon multiple writer blocks which deterred his self-esteem and his overall success. As he said, he lived in an age of art, excess, and satire. Both of these authors represent the ideals of expatriates. After the war, Europe began to rebuild and new ideas began to surface which interested many authors. A new form of writing matched the new ideals of the century. Hemingway and Fitzgerald used the events of World War I and the culture after the war as inspiration for some of the greatest novels in American literature.
The lost generation is classified as the generation of men and women who came of age during or immediately following World War I, viewed as a result of their war experiences and the social upheaval of the time as cynical, disillusioned, and without cultural or emotional stability. As David has previously mentioned, two very famous writers that have come from this period of writing are Hemingway and Fitzgerald. What makes the lost generation of writers similar is their stylistic techniques. All the writers of the group had one goal in mind, to let the reader work to figure out the meaning of the passages. Hemingway and Fitzgerald both used many literary devices to give clues to the reader as of what the passages may be symbolic of and mean. Fitzgerald uses long, extended metaphors in his most famous pieces of literature, which include The Great Gatsby, This Side of Paradise, and Tender is the Night. Hemingway also follows the pattern of the writers of the Lost Generation, such in his book The Old Man and the Sea. He embeds deep clues into his writing, so the reader is required to read between the lines. Ideas in the books of famous authors were another way that the authors were grouped into the Lost Generation. In an interview with Kirk Connett, an author who has published many books about the Lost Generation, writes that some main ideas written in the books from the time period were alienation, unstable mores, drinking, divorce, sex, and different variations of unconventional identities, gender bending, for example. There was very little interest in writing about others, and they weren't particularly gracious to people who weren't like them. There is a lot of satire in the Lost Generation fiction, and most of it makes fun of elders or figures of authority, and, unfortunately, Jews. Perhaps the truly contradictory thing is that these writers wanted it both ways. They wanted to write about breaking boundaries, but they also wanted to reserve the right to laminate their falling away from norms and standards. The Lost Generation gifted America with many great novels, and people still study and learn from their stylistic and literary techniques used by many gifted authors from the time period of the Lost Generation. Thank you very much.